Hey, we're back. Eli Skinner here with Simplify Real Estate, trying to make sure we've got our ducks in a row for all the things that will pop up in real estate. We're going to talk about, I added this at the bottom here if you've been watching some of the other videos, mutual release and earnest money. So mutual release is where both parties have decided that they are going to mutually release each other from the effects of the contract. So I no longer am going to purchase your home, I'm no longer going to sell you my home, and we agreed to not do that, okay? That's a mutual release. Now, there's an element in there that gets fought over, I think some percentage of the time, that's called earnest money. Earnest money is what the buyer has put down as a deposit to say, here's how earnest I am, here's how serious I am about buying your home, I'm not going to walk away for a reason that is not legit. If I do, you keep my money. That's the security that the seller has that this buyer is going to complete the transaction. There are lots of ways the transaction could end, and earnest money is clearly specified to come back in the contracts. An example, if Patrick and I are in a deal together and I say, hey, I'll sell you my house on a first right contingency. The first right contingency form, the actual contract itself says, in the event Eli doesn't sell his house in the specified time period in the contract, then all earnest money, the deal's dead and all the earnest money is returned to me, the buyer, okay? Because I wasn't able to sell my house and that's what the contract said. But it states that explicitly in there, okay? Then there's other types of contingencies, like a first right, but that don't state specifically what happens to the earnest money. And some people tend to think of this as very black and white. What I think of them as is social norms. There are kind of social norms to what happens to earnest money, okay? So most people will tell you if financing falls apart, for instance, earnest money is returned to the buyer, right? Now let me throw a kind of a wrench in that philosophy. And the problem is nobody sues each other, so it's hard to come up with actual answers until somebody sues somebody. Like I'm literally would love it for one of you guys, not for your sanity purposes, but for finding out purposes. I'd love it for one of you guys to get in a situation where your client is in this situation and they sue each other. Let's find out what the court absolutely decides on this, okay? But let me throw a wrench in this. I mean, this seems right. Hey, I can't get financed. My financing falls apart, the income, my employer doesn't cooperate, all of a sudden the deal falls apart, and because I can't get my money from the bank, okay? It's a financing contingency. It says it right there in the thing. This deal is contingent on the seller obtaining financing or the buyer obtaining financing according to these terms. You know, that's why we write in, it's a conventional loan. So anything other than a conventional or an insured conventional, anything other than an insured conventional loan, I don't have to buy the house. I'm going to say 30-year term. Anything less than a 30-year term, more than anything other than a 30-year, no, see, it says no more than. Anything over 30 years, I don't have to buy the house. Anything over 0 points, I don't have to buy the house. Anything over a certain interest rate, I don't have to buy the house, okay? That means, in my opinion, you don't get sued for specific performance. Patrick can't make me buy the house on a financing, because I have a financing contingency that says any interest rate over 5%, I'm not buying the house. Because I was basing my affordability of this house on 30 years, no points, 5% interest, and 5% down. So if I have to do more than 5% down, then I have the ability to not buy the house. Okay, that's a financing contingency. If any of those terms change and get worse for the buyer, he can go, I'm out. Okay, sounds reasonable. Maybe interest rates jump the week after we put our contract together, and now my interest rate's 10%. That's why that financing is there. That contingency is there. But here is the question. In most cases, contingencies that are not met terminate the contract and earnest money is returned. So similar to the first right contingency. But here's another one I did not too long ago. I had buyers from Washington State. The husband was already here. Him and I looked at the house. He FaceTimed his wife. She liked the pictures online. She liked what we saw on FaceTime. But she's like, I'm coming there in a week. How do we do this? I said, hey, we'll write an offer that literally says, this home is contingent upon the wife's acceptance of the property by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Sunday to whatever at 11:59 p.m., right? Who is it? What do they have to do? What time do they have to do it? What happens in the event it's not done? This is contingencies for you. So it said in all earnest money, if the property is not accepted by, if there's a letter in writing basically that says, hey, we don't accept the property by Sunday at 11:59 p.m., we get all our earnest money back. If there is no communication, this is all written. I wrote all this out to be clear. If there is no communication from us to you, it is automatically accepted. Okay, because I didn't want to like get deadly ill and all of a sudden I don't tell them, hey, we're taking it, or email them, hey, we're taking it, and they don't get it. So it's automatically accepted if we pass this date, kind of like inspection. But if we give it to you in writing Sunday at before 11:59 p.m., then we can get out of the deal. All earnest money is returned to the buyer. So who needs to do what? The wife needs to accept the property. How do we do it? We're gonna, unaccept it in writing, whatever it is. I wrote this really long and good contingency for that. But notice I put what happens at the end of it. What happens in the event this contingency is not met? That's a key component to a contingency, in my opinion, is clarity. And there are some of these contingencies that are not clear in our contracts. So one, you have an opportunity, you can make them clear by writing it in the further conditions that if financing falls through for any reason, earnest money is returned to the buyer. Because here's what I'm going to tell you about a financing contingency, for instance, where the gray sneaks in. It's not black and white, in my opinion. So, you got a 45-day close. Buyer decides that they really, really, really do not want the house anymore for whatever reason. They're going to get a divorce. Okay? All of a sudden, they can't get financed. Because they're getting a divorce, so they're not going to be on a loan together. So they're refusing to be on a loan together now. Financing's now falling apart. 45 days into the deal, you've been off the market for 45 days and paying a mortgage for 45 days, and now you're going to pay it for another 45 days, so you got to find another buyer. Has the seller been damaged? Absolutely. Now, is it just an inherent risk in selling your house to somebody with a loan that you have to absorb, any potential reason they wouldn't get a loan? I don't know. That seems a little sketchy to me. It's a little gray to me. Make it even worse. That's kind of like a personal, we didn't do this on purpose, okay? What if we did it on purpose? What if a buyer decides they don't want the house 45 days in, 1 day before close, 2 days before close, and they're like, we don't want the house. Their agent's going, what do you mean you don't want the house? We're in it, there's nothing we can do. You got your loan ready, you get the He goes, okay, well, I'm just gonna take $1,000 that I have laying at home, I'm gonna deposit it in my bank. And then I'm gonna go to the bank and go, I don't know where it came from. The bank's gonna go, well, we have to know where it came from or you can't get a loan. I don't know. And they remove the loan. Now you can't get financed. Does that sound like something you should get your earnest money back for? Huh? No! That just makes no sense whatsoever. This is why I want somebody to sue somebody. Because this is the junk that happens, and it's the stuff that I'm gonna end up doing. I would do the same thing with my client. I have to do what they want to do. You want out of the deal? Here's the way you get out of the deal. Don't get financed. Break one of the contingencies. You may not get your earnest money back. You might. I don't know. It depends on what the other agent and their clients are going to do, right? So it's very important, in my opinion, that you guys are as clear as possible whenever you're doing anything. I write exactly what's going to happen. Give you another example. On the first right contingency form, it says, when you sell your home and you release the contingency, now it moves to contingent to close on the home you just sold. So again, me and Patrick here, I have to sell my house before I buy Patrick's, right? So I accept an offer on my house, I remove the contingency. We're actually doing this on another deal right now. I remove the contingency with Patrick. The first right contingency paper says specifically, once we've accepted an offer on our house to sell over here, then it moves automatically to the next level down, which is contingent to close. So if I don't close my house, I still don't have to go forward in this purchase. But what it doesn't say is what happens if this house doesn't close. It says what happens if I never sell it. If I never pinned it, I get my earnest money back. But if I pinned it and then I don't close it for some reason, what happens to the earnest money? It doesn't say. It just says it will be released according to a mutual, it'll be whatever according to a mutual release. So we all just decide, I guess, but then we end up fighting over it, 60-day letters go out and all this mess. So on my first rights, I clear that up. In the event this house doesn't close, we get our earnest money back. Okay? Now, you may not sign it, you may sign it, who knows what. But that's an example of, we don't just be clear, work through those issues. Because you will run into those gray spots where in your heart of hearts, and everybody else should know in the world that's got a brain and a heart and everything else, and that can be empathetic with people, that you should not get your earnest money back when your deal falls apart because you went out and bought a truck 3 days before closing and now your loan fell through. Or you just had your buddy who's an insurance agent write, at day 14, because the inspection was perfect, no defects, and you still went out of the deal for some reason. You had your insurance buddy write you a thing that says, nope, we can't give you insurance on this house because it's contingent on obtaining insurance. I have 14 days to get insurance or whatever. There's lots of ways to sneaky get out of a deal. And so how can we as agents help our clients not get hosed in the process? So be very careful, be very clear, think critically all the time. And you're going, how in the world is this affecting my client? Or how in the world can I give my client the upper hand in this situation? Okay, those are keys. But to kind of take this a little bit further, there is a way to do a mutual release where you guys say, basically you write it in other. So mutual release is 3 lines. One is mutual release, earnest money of this amount is to be returned to the buyer, paid to the seller, or other. In other, you could write, parties mutually agree to release each other from the contract, but there is still a dispute over earnest money. So that means he can go on and sell his house, I can go on and go buy a different one, but we can still fight over earnest money offline. That makes sense? That's a great way to do it if it benefits your client. If it doesn't benefit your client, don't do it, right? Hold their feet to the fire. Keep them in the deal as long as possible. Say, fine, you went out of this thing, I'm gonna tie you up for as long as I possibly can. If that's what benefits your client the most, help them do that, okay? But if it helps to say, listen, we just wanna buy a new house, you can go sell your house to somebody else, we'll fight over earnest money, that's fine, but let's just move on with our lives at the same time. That's also a really good way to do that. And then the final piece of this for now that I'll say is the earnest money. There's what's called a 60-day notice or a 60-day letter. And the 60-day letter, I'll write that down, 60-day letter. Okay, if you cannot come to an agreement on what's going to happen with this earnest money, the listing broker, the managing broker of the listing agent, okay, is going to write a 60-day letter because they're holding the earnest money, right? They're going to write a letter to the buyer's agent's broker that says, the clock has started. Here's what we're going to do with the earnest money. You have 60 days to agree, come to a resolution, or file a lawsuit. This isn't a fun place to be. But that's what happens, right? We're not going to sit around for the remainder of time and just bicker back and forth. Patrick in this case, as the listing agent, his broker is going to write a letter to my broker and say, hey, the clock started, you have 60 days. Here's what we're going to do with our earnest money. We're going to keep it. And you can either agree to it, come to a resolution with us independently, like we'll talk it out, or file a lawsuit to try and get it back. Okay? If that 60 days expires and no lawsuit's been filed and it's not been signed, agreement, resolution, or then they have to file a lawsuit. If that's not happening after 60 days, then what was stated in the letter is what happens. Okay? 60-day letter. It's not a big deal. It happens, and literally, we've been asked for. We're like, hey, when are you guys going to send the letter? Well, the goal is to not send the letter. The goal is to come to a resolution, but, it is what it is. The question is, are you going to take a risk, or your client's going to take a risk? Because if they say, I'm keeping it, okay, cool. Are you willing to get sued over it? No. Okay, well, we might want to come to a resolution then. I'm keeping it. Okay, are you cool with getting sued over it? Absolutely, no problem. Okay, you realize that there's no limit to your loss on the lawsuit side of things. But if we mutually agree to something, your loss is limited to whatever we agree to. So $1,000 earnest money, we split it at 500, you know your loss is $500. If you get sued over it and the judge sides with them, your loss is $1,000 plus legal fees, plus whatever time off work they took, plus who knows, right? I don't know if they're allowed all that sort of punitive damages, but you got to be careful with that. That's kind of the idea. So, questions: earnest money, mutual releases. Here it is. What can you do when you're signing? You've got a deal, it's falling apart. You don't have a mutual release signed. You can't come to an agreement on earnest money. 60-day letters going out. I mean, what do? Sit on the house for 60 days? Can I not, buyer, can I not buy a house for another 60 days? Because until you guys mutual release, you're under contract. Unless you cross over a line like the closing date, which causes an automatic termination, okay? So you've got some time to wait potentially, unless it happened right at the end of the contract. But here's what you can do is, as a listing agent, you can make your next sale contingent on the signing of a mutual release with the previous transaction. Okay, so you would write and here's how you do it, precisely. You have to disclose this sort of stuff. You put your house back on the market. It is not illegal to do this. And you have the next person write the offer that says, in further conditions, this purchase agreement is contingent upon a mutual release being signed by the previous, for the previous transaction. You have to put a date in there because that's you have to have an end date for a contingency of when it's supposed to, by this date. You may give them a week, you may give them 3 days, you may give them 2 weeks, doesn't matter to you, just up to your client. But you do that. So the listing agents put it in the agent to agent remarks that this house is active, no big deal. But in the agent to agent remarks, you're going to write, please write all offers contingent to a signed mutual release from the previous transaction. So now the agents know when I write my offer, I'm going to write, hey, this offer is contingent on a signed mutual release by August 5th from the previous transaction. If that doesn't happen, then that deal terminates and it's over. And you could even write, earnest money will be delivered when mutual release is signed. Right? There's all kinds of ways to be clear to protect your client. I'm not going to turn in earnest money to a guy we already know likes to hold it and not get out of deals. I'm going to wait till you sign a mutual release and I'll deliver it. Okay? There's all kinds of ways to go about doing that. But that's what you can do if you don't have a mutual release signed. Seller, buyer side, same thing. It's going to stink because you're making an offer on another house and you're saying, hey, this is actually contingent on me getting a mutual release signed at the house I was previously under contract with. Okay? And again, don't forget, you can sign mutual releases and still fight over earnest money by clicking the other mark and say, buyer and seller mutual release each other from the contract, but there's still a dispute over earnest money. And then you're good to go. You just go fight over earnest money, but you could both move on with your lives. Okay? Make sense? Can you sell a house with no? Yes, you can resell it without a mutual release signed. It's just got to be a contingent. You got to tell everybody in the world, all the agents in the world, what's going on, so that they're not showing a house to a buyer they shouldn't be. Questions, thoughts, ideas? Okay. That's earnest money mutual releases. A lot of information there. It's good for you.